I'm following this planting. We have plenty of soil moisture to start with at 2 inches and plenty of runway yet to get them to germinate. So my 4-row planter ran through the field, and these 4 rows we were targeting about 2 1/4 to 2.5 inches deep, and this is 10 days later, and after a 1-inch rainfall last night. So these 2 rows are looking pretty good. This row is what I've been targeting to try to figure out what's going on. It has this huge gap where I don't have any plants, and now I know which row that was, and could be something going on with that row unit. And this row has a similar feature but not as bad. It's still a 5-foot gap is just not going to work for me. So already some data to look at on these 2 row units. These 4 row units might help give us a reason for the problem, and these were planted a 1/2 inch shallower, and you see all 4 of them exhibiting some pretty bad gaps. And finally, this last unit had no down pressure on the closing wheels, so the Thompson wheels were just working using their own weight to close the trench. So significant gaps here. Not so bad here, but from what I can tell, look at this outside row unit. This is just a 1/2 inch shallower, and we didn't get into moisture, and we got almost nothing. And then these 4 row units again were just 1/2 inch deeper, showing pretty good emergence. So this is part 2. I'm going to keep tracking this, and then we'll try to investigate what's going on once we see. Like, I think we already know now this row unit has got some issues, because here's another big gap. Thanks for watching. Alright, moving down the field here. This is where I adjusted my closing wheels to have a little more down pressure. And these 4 row units, I added a 1/4 inch of planting depth, and getting a little better stand on these 4 row units. So I'm starting to lean towards the reason I get the uneven emergence is my seeds aren't going deep enough into moisture, at least for this pass. We were at 28% soil moisture, so at least the top 1.5 inches was dry. I think you guys know what it's like to plant into that, and so you're really reaching to try to get to the mud at the 2-inch or below depth. So I'm seeing some improvement here. This is where I adjusted the planting depth. Across this experiment, my down pressure was maintained. These 4 row units were at my maximum depth, 2 1/4 to 2.5, and this area was where I have the maximum down pressure on the closing wheels. Something I'm seeing here is I'm struggling to get through this mat of carpet weed. Termination had been done 2 days ahead of planting, and there was enough life left in this mat where my row cleaners didn't clear it out. So with the emergence, it's coming a little later in this mat, and there's hairpinning in there. So it would have been better to have it pretty crispy so you could see some black soil push across. This is more of a summer weed, so it shouldn't be growing, and I'm going to be taking care of it with some pre-emerge products next year. But just highlighting, even with the great setup, we still struggle to get through there. So here I'm showing a few feet of late emergers, Here's one that emerged on time, and then you can see down the row on this unit it emerged pretty equally. And I know from growing sweet corn that my late emergers always have smaller ears and they're smaller plants. One nice thing about growing sweet corn is you're hand picking it, and you figure out pretty quick that you go in for a first picking and the biggest ears you get are from that first picking, and then 5 days later the ear size goes even smaller, and then your final picking is all smaller ears, leading you to believe that they emerged later and also resulted in smaller ears. So at the end of the day, I really want these all to emerge together and all create big ears so they all mature evenly. So here's a late emerger, another late emerger, another one. So later in the season this might fill out fine, but I'm not getting the 100% yield that I want. I think what I'm finding here is the row unit rode up and my planting depth rose up here in this kind of area. Because if you look at this row, there's really no issues with residue. It cleared out just fine. But for the couple seconds this area was driven over, I'm going 4.5 miles an hour. My unit must have come up a good ½ inch or so I wasn't quite into moisture, and so that seed germinated a little bit slower, and now they're coming out. Like I said, this is 10 days after planting, and we planted in a dry soil, and we just got a rain last night. So all the moisture for germination had to come from what was down there at 2 inches or more. Pretty tough and challenging, and that's why I'm doing this. And this is also on my end rows where the compaction is hardest, so I'm really challenging these seed to get out of the ground uniformly. And this is what I'm seeing. I think it's the down pressure, not as much as the depth setting, although I think the depth setting does kind of help mask it. That's what we're seeing. So my past way of checking down pressure was just stopping and statically moving the press wheels, and if they didn't move I knew I had enough down pressure. And then I'd also check the trench, because I obviously didn't want to overdo it. But as a result of just that static test, I'm still seeing these kind of issues where this must have risen up out of the ground. Or you could try to argue that this area just didn't have the same moisture as the next 5 feet, which I guess is possible, but I think if I had stayed at the continuous same depth, I wouldn't have had an issue. So I think when I'm doing my static down pressure checking, I'm probably just going to add some pressure and really lock it in.